I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is TCS, the show brought to you by TechCentral. Visit us at techcentral.co.za. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so on YouTube at youtube.com/TechCentral. Now, I'm pleased to welcome back a familiar face to the show. Tesh Durvasula is Chief Executive of Africa Data Centers, part of Cassava Technologies. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly this time.
Well done, Duncan.
Thank you, Tesh.
Well
Thank
done.
you. You're in New York today?
I am.
Great,
Yep.
great. Where do you spend most of your time, by the way?
So Africa, London, and then in front of clients, and many of our clients are North American based hyperscale. So it calls me to come to the U.S. and Europe. Okay. A lot of their EMEA decisions are made out of Europe, quite frankly. So it's convenient to stay in London or parts of Europe.
Parts of Europe. Okay. Well, it's good to see you. Welcome again to the show. What have you been up to since we last?
Thanks for having me.
What have you been up to since we last spoke? You mentioned that there's some activity going on in West Africa.
Well, we announced in the fall of 21 that we had aspirations to be in 10 countries. We're currently operating in 3 with a partnership in a 4th in Togo, but we are now we're pleased to announce that we're going to be building in Ghana shortly. And so West Africa is very important to the continent of Africa, and B, next to our Nigeria Lagos market, we know that Ghana to be a very rich and fertile ground for digitalization. We've got the support of the local governments and ministry, and so we're very excited for our expansion into Ghana.
Brilliant. So just maybe take us through the scale of the data center you're planning to build there, and what are some of the challenges you're facing in that particular market? I know that Ghana hasn't had the best time economically over the last couple of years, and they've had very high inflation. How has that played into your investments thinking around that market?
Listen, at a macro level, the entire planet's suffering from some sort of inflation. So we're not going to base our long-term strategy on some short-term events that are happening on a fiscal policy basis. We've always said from Cape Town to Casablanca, from Lagos to Nairobi, we were interested in going north, south, east, and west. There's half a dozen to a dozen countries that we want to be in, and some of those are in West Africa. So whether right now Ghana became very attractive to us, it's part of our mission. I think the short-term challenges are okay. We'll get through them. The people there will still need data centers. To answer your question directly about our size, we typically buy enough land to build campuses of anywhere from 10 to 20, 30 megawatts. But we typically start smaller, 5 megawatt type shells with 1 to 3 megawatts of initial capacity, with the ability to grow that 5x if we need to. And we think Ghana will be the same. We won't go away from our traditional model. It's our most efficient use of capital, and it allows us to deploy capital as demand is coming. So it's good. It's good on both sides for us.
Right, Tesh. So our topic of discussion today is digital transformation in Africa, and it's obviously digital transformation is a hot button topic and has been for several years. I tend to get a different view on what it means exactly, depending on who I'm talking to. So perhaps in the context of cloud and data centers, what is your definition of digital transformation?
I think it's 2 or 3-fold, right? At the cleanest level, how is the digitization of products and services impacting the lives of Africans, right? And so can you open a bank account? Can you get healthcare services? Can you transfer money? Can you view entertainment? Are you getting the applications that you need to help your life? And that transformation is happening. You're in Johannesburg. I operate in 4 different countries. If you go outside, it's pretty tough not to see someone looking down at their phone. And so Africa's getting connected. They're getting connected quickly, and whether it's ADC and our data centers or some of the other infrastructure providers on the continent, it's happening very fast. This recent economic challenge with you mentioned high inflation earlier. It's pausing or slowing down some development, because people have to be very careful about where they put their money and how long it takes to invest it. So that's a macro level challenge, but the fundamentals are still there, right? We have 1.4 billion people at the end of this decade, of which 400 million are going to be between the age of 18 and 35. And I think I've used this term, Duncan, on your show before. I call it the restless youth of Africa. They want to do things differently, and they're not slowing down. So I see that we're going to continue to move forward in spite of some short-term economic issues.
It's interesting to talk about investment in data centers. I've seen some reports lately suggesting that, particularly with the hiking in interest rates in the US, that a lot of the global capital that was flowing, particularly from America and into emerging markets and into the tech space, and specifically into venture capital and startups, has dried up, and a lot of that money was flowing into Africa. Are you seeing a similar sort of effect in the infrastructure side of things in the data center bills, or is there still a huge appetite there by investors to invest in new infrastructure?
Yeah, I think there's. Listen, you have to be. Your comments are valid. You're definitely seeing some concern. This is probably the most difficult environment in the last 25 years to deploy capital in and raise capital in. I speak to my friends in North America, Europe, Central, Eastern Europe. It's a very difficult environment. So having said that, we have seen a bigger interest in Africa in the last 12 to 18 months than we've seen ever before. Just recently you had we did a groundbreaking in Kenya. Ambassador from the United States, Ambassador Margaret Meg Whitman, was in attendance, and we announced that we're building and we're expanding our current data center and building a new one. I think Vice President Kamala Harris was in Africa 3 weeks ago, and so I think the interest from the United States and the West to continue to support African development is there, in spite of the short-term economic challenges. And remember, you can't make these decisions based on what's exactly happening today, right? You have a long-term view of Africa being a continent that can support a digital infrastructure. You want to help both the growing middle class and the educated population of Africa participate in the digital economy. And so many direct foreign investment funds are still active in Africa and then still providing resources for investment. And, we want to thank our partners, the DFC and the IFC, for continuing to help us. And they've been fantastic partners. And we think that we're going to prove them right, that over time, these are the markets that you want to invest in.
What is the potential of the African continent for the business that you're in? There's been a lot of investment in data centers across, particularly here in South Africa, actually, funnily enough. A lot of companies seem to be choosing Johannesburg as their base for serving the rest of the continent. I don't know. Do you have a view on companies coming in and building these hyperscale data centers in Joburg to serve the whole continent? Because you're building data centers right across the continent. Some companies seem to have the approach, well, we'll just put one down in Joburg and serve the whole of Africa. You're taking a different approach. You're saying there needs to be one in all the major markets.
Africa has 51 beautiful countries, and my belief is, and our belief is, that all of those countries deserve good, solid infrastructure. Everyone has to pick a place to go first, and so Johannesburg has been a place to land, and for good reason. There's the capital markets are very very mature. South African exchange, banking, healthcare, government are all strong in South Africa. So it makes good sense to make if you're going to make your first move, South Africa is a great choice. We also happen to believe Nairobi is a great choice. We also believe Lagos is a great choice. And now recently, Ghana and Accra. And soon we'll be in, North Africa, in whether it's Morocco or Egypt. We're going to go to where the businesses are. If you look at the African 500, Africa's 500 largest companies, they span all sorts of those enterprises span all sorts of businesses, and so and you realize that they are all over Africa. So of course, some markets enjoy tourism as a number one trade, but whether it's coffee, energy, minerals, mining, there's lots to do in Africa. So we believe that you have to be everywhere. And it's gonna happen. In North America, the internet capital of the world was Northern Virginia for the longest time, and it spread to the rest of the states. In Europe, Western Europe, it was Slough in London, outside of London, and it's now moved to other countries. Same thing's going to happen in Africa. I think South Africa is a great place to start if that's what you choose. But we also believe that there's lots of business everywhere.
You spoke a bit earlier about the youth in Africa wanting to do things differently and perhaps having a different outlook on the world. Perhaps get a view, and steering back to the topic of digital transformation, are there some unique challenges that this continent faces, particularly when it comes to establishing data centers and cloud infrastructure?
We can attack this question. We can spend hours on this, so probably longer than we have for this interview. First and foremost, the standard infrastructure has to get in place, right? So if you're in South Africa right now, you realize that load shedding is still a big challenge, and a data center needs power, and most of the digital transformation requires some units of power. So good, clean energy in Africa is going to be a gating item everywhere you go. Nairobi is, if you're in the city center of Nairobi, 70%, 75% of the power is renewable energy. So, and the grid is, 3 nines reliable. So there's a good advantage there to, think about Kenya as an opportunity to grow. There is a challenge with, you talked about inflation. So, foreign currency exchange and is a huge challenge. If you're not pegged to the US dollar, sterling, or euro, and there is no free auction, and you can't write contracts in local currency can be very difficult to operate in, whether it be Zimbabwe, Kenya shilling, whatever. The rand, I think, is, upwards of 18.2.
19.4.
And there you have it. And last year it was 16. So, that's a huge change for companies who are trying to write, for multinational companies who are trying to write contracts in dollars or euros or pounds. So those are some of the things that are going to be challenges for people.
Yep.
The other one is governments, right? Lots of governments are very supportive and have some sort of ICT, data, telecoms minister and commissioner that is focused on this transformation. Others don't. And so as governments continue to get more educated on how they can provide services for the country, simple things like, title to land or driver's licenses, right? These are services in terms of digital transformation the government wants to support. They want to have it digitized. They don't want paper. And when they're taking the progressive view on these things, it's very helpful to us as service providers because we can assist them get there. And then all of the big application providers, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, they're all coming into Africa trying to help these governments. So it's easy for you to go get your driver's license, on the internet versus standing in line at a facility.
In your experience, is it getting easier or more difficult to do business in Africa, generally speaking, in the major markets?
I think it's generally getting easier. I think in spite of the short-term challenges where, like, if you said data center 5 years ago in Africa, they'd say, what, who? And now everybody knows what a data center is. The telecom companies, Liquid are one of our sister company, MTN, Vodafone. These guys have done a really good job of building network infrastructure into and around the continent. You've got two major cables being built by hyperscale North American cloud providers coming into service now in Africa 2 and Equino. So I think the infrastructure is getting in place and the education is getting in place. And that's the other thing, the education. 5 years ago, it was really difficult to get a physical engineer to work at a data center. Now those skills are coming into the country. People are training in facility management, and that's happening. There's always going to be some bad people, Duncan. We know that. What's gone on with Eskom and the power in South Africa, when the story's finally written on that, there's going to be some very bad people took a lot of money and defrauded, a lot of South Africans of basic services. So barring that kind of behavior, I think people are really looking forward to helping us, and governments are doing their part in helping us.
Let's drill down onto South Africa specifically, because you mentioned them. You mentioned the Eskom example, and you're sitting in New York right now. What is the American view of South Africa? We've had this situation now with the Russian ship and the alleged arms shipments to Russia, etc. What has that actually meant on the global stage for the view of South Africa as an investment destination?
I don't speak for the government
but just a feeling amongst business people about
about the country. Yeah. Look, I believe that if you're looking at African continent, South Africa is a major piece of that, right? And if you look at like I said earlier, if you look at the African 500 companies, I think 22 or 25% of them are in South Africa. So whether it be Standard Bank or Old Mo. These are big, recognizable global names. At the end of the day, nobody wants any kind of escalation here. And I think, yes, there was that initial saber rattling from both sides. We can do what we want, and we're not going to like that. And you saw, I think it went up to, like you said, 19.4. Rand to dollar. But since then, I think everyone's kind of pulled their statements back, and cooler heads will prevail. I can tell you, in the places I run in and the people that I talk to, they view South Africa as a vital partner to the U.S., an area that if the U.S. wants to continue its intentional efforts to help the African people, South Africa is going to be a big part of that. And it's not the only part, though. And because of that, everyone should be careful, right? There's, like I said, 50 other countries you can invest in, and they all would like the resources that the West can bring them. But the West has to realize, and for the last 6 to 10 years, the East has spent a lot of time and money in Africa, right? There's been lots of development aided and helped by Chinese and Indians. So they have options also. So I think it's very important that both parties understand how to talk to each other and do it in a civil manner. And here's the thing, right? History is proven. When we trade with each other, we share education, we share technology, everyone moves up and to the right. And ultimately, that's where I think we will end up landing. But
a bit bumpy along the way.
As we know, it's a little bumpy along the way. But I mean, listen, I don't know how many millions or billions of dollars the power company took of funds from across the world to build infrastructure in South Africa. And not only was it not built, I don't remember the exact numbers, but some portion, a major portion of the power in South Africa is still coal.
Yes.
And so, so how is it that, for the last, 25, 30 years, South African governments have been and companies were taking money from the West and from everywhere else, and it didn't go into the infrastructure. That type of behavior, and that's globally, right? U.S. needs to do its own work in improving infrastructure, but South Africa claims to be, one of the most advanced nations on the continent. I travel. I've visited 4 continents in the last 12 months. I haven't been stuck on an elevator or an escalator anywhere else but in South Africa. Because look, it's just a fact. And so that's the part where I think we just got to look deep and say, how do we make this better? And I think we can. I think like I said, there's a lot of good interest, and talking about digital transformation, the West has spent a lot of time looking at how do we bring services to the African continent, and I think that conversation is more vital now than it's ever been.
Let's talk a bit about success stories, particularly around digital transformation initiatives and data center developments on the continent. Can you maybe share some examples with us of, it doesn't necessarily have to be as a direct result of an Africa data center build, but just some examples of how cloud computing, how cloud infrastructure that companies like Africa Data Centers is deploying on the continent has directly impacted on people's lives.
Take Kenya, for example. It took the average Kenyan 3 years ago about a week to open a bank account, maybe longer, right? Had to fill out paperwork, triplicate, show up, go. Now you can do that online. You know, all of, not all, but many of the larger financial services in Africa, you know, if no matter what your profession is, you've got a few Kenyan shillings, rand, whatever it is, you can open up your phone and make a deposit and create security for yourself. That's a huge advantage for many Africans and young people especially. So from that, they create the next opportunities. They can trade and buy securities on the London Stock Exchange, the South African Stock Exchange, etc. So I'd say that financial services is one. The second is healthcare. We're seeing more and more. There's a big what's the word? Investment from large multinational companies to help countries with their national healthcare systems. And Oracle, Microsoft, Amazon, they're all spending time and money in country helping the governments improve how they disperse and help with everything from social health care to your retirement and pension payments, etc. These are huge advantages for lots of middle class working Africans. And it's not sexy, right? Oh, it's not a moonshot to Mars. It's not, oh, look at this big sexy game. But it's this type of stuff. It's the simple blocking and tackling that makes everyone's lives better. And it's very impactful, right? When you know that you can open an account and you have, where your pension funds are, and you can look at your money that you've earned, that's very satisfying to the average African.
Yeah.
And listen, we're still a very young continent. And, I keep referring to this restless youth. Well, they are going to be driving a lot of this change. So specifically, I would, what I'm seeing is financial services, banking, electronic payments. Right, you're seeing more and more cashless transactions across the continent, and then the government helping in everyday life, whether it be pension or healthcare. That's where you're seeing a lot of digital transformation.
Yeah. And that all flows out of these investments in data centers. I suppose sometimes it's difficult to measure.
Well, I would say, I'm going to say, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Broadly, I would say it's digital infrastructure.
Sure.
Right. It's
undersea cables.
It's fiber optics, undersea cables, towers, wireless, and data centers. So you put all of them together, and that's what's happening. And that's why a lot of the investment comes out of telecom companies. Our roots are from Liquid Network, but there's MTN, there's Vodafone, there's lots of large companies.
What I was going to say is I think it's probably quite difficult to tangibly measure the economic impact that flows out of these investments, because, I mean, how do you actually measure the economic importance and impact of the ability of a Kenyan to open a digital bank account in a few seconds? I mean, how do you actually determine what impact this is all having on economic growth and development in Africa? I suppose you can look at the human development numbers out of the World Health Organization. I guess you could even look at numbers like that, and GDP numbers, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you actually quantify the impact that investment in digital infrastructure is having on the broader economies in Africa? Yeah.
So I think you look at, there's a bunch of metrics, right? So you mentioned one, World Health Organization, communicable diseases and education around hygiene and healthcare, literacy rates. Right, as literacy rates move up, that you're participating in a more mobile economy and a more educated economy. We talked about infectious disease. Infectious disease down, literacy rates up. Right, GDP, household income up. Right, then you're seeing that happen. If you look at how we measured it in North America, in Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, and I would say you use the same metrics. You're right. It is a little nebulous because it's difficult to talk about how many lives you impacted with a data center. But we've gone mobile, so we can measure mobility, digital mobile phones into an economy, right? How many millions or billions of phones are being sold into the market. From that, you can then go to the next level, which is, what types of applications are they using? How much data is being consumed? And one of the things that we measure, so Africa is growing at one of the fastest rates, right? It's doubling almost every 18 months or something like that. The problem is it's still only 3% of what's happening in North America and like 4% of what's happening in Europe. So we are making unbelievable progress, and there are a bunch of metrics that we can measure. But I would say that we've got it. The number one thing is that education, literacy rates, and that household income, right? When the average person's household income is moving up, then you know that you're having an impact on the planet. So
now the infrastructure we're talking about, the digital infrastructure we're talking about, in many ways is kind of the base for everything else that's going to flow. In terms of innovation in banking, in industries across the board, in terms of things like artificial intelligence, which has got the world excited at the moment, et cetera, et cetera. Let's explore that in a bit of detail as we come towards the end of the conversation. I wanted to maybe start by talking about the regulatory landscape, and as you're building these data centers, what are some of the challenges you face in terms of regulation around security, around data privacy, around similar issues, and do those differ from what you see in other markets?
Sure. So that's a very, very, that part of what we need in terms of regulatory issues and data privacy. So GDPR is kind of the one of the standards that is being considered, and we need that type of regulation in all the countries. Now, like I said, 51 countries, 41 different currencies in Africa, which is French for we don't agree on much. and so we're going to have to agree on some sort of an Africa Union kind of data policy. So, information that's created in one market can be safe there, and countries agree to hold other countries' information, which that's a very sensitive issue. Companies holding other companies' information, also a very sensitive issue. So we need more maturity, and we need more sophistication around that. When it comes to AI, you're seeing, basically two schools of thought appear right now. I'm sure you're familiar with the Big Pause letter, right? The letter signed by many very
senior people,
prestigious luminaries,
including
Steve Wozniak, Elon Musk, etc. So there's one group that says, hey, we got to just pause and let's take a look at what we're doing. And there's another group that says, no, we're going to run as fast as we can because what we've seen, and I, not that my view is anywhere in the same breath as Wozniak or Musk's, but I would tell you that if you look through history, whether it was running water, the wheel, the combustion engine, the internet, man has stood alongside technology, and there's going to be a certain amount of disruption that happens at first, but then usually there's an expansion of wealth, an expansion of knowledge, an expansion of safety and humanity, and we do better over time. I believe that's the same thing's going to happen, but people are concerned because there's obviously huge impacts to the social well-being of our folks. But if you drill down a little bit more and talk about infrastructure and what it means. So the average search, if you go on Google or whatever your search engine is of the day, it takes whatever 1 kW of power or a little less than a kW of power, 1 megabit of compute and storage capacity. An AI search takes 5 to 10x more capacity. So that means you need 5 to 10x more fiber optic capacity, mobile capacity, data center capacity. Everything is going to be, you need more of it. And this if you're old like me, you remember when the internet was about people just saving pictures for grandma, and now we're at an incredibly new place in development. So in terms of investment that's going to happen and where it goes, and to drill down even further, which industry is going to be impacted the most? And if you struggle with let's use two big things that are an issue in Africa, right? We want more doctors and we want more teachers. If I have access to all of the medical information on the planet and access to all of the written knowledge on the planet through an AI source, do you think I can impact literacy rates and health care in Africa? Yeah, absolutely. And if you're the working mother of 2 and you just want to get some meds for your 2 sick kids and you don't know what it is, and you can now do a similar pinprick like you do for a diabetic blood sugar, and you have a little thing that you plug into your phone and you put that on there, and it can do a full set of blood analysis for you. And then it says, I'm 93% sure you have this. And you have a doctor that just says, oh, we prescribed this for that. And that's the only thing you need the doctor for the meds piece. The working mother can now get meds. She can get her 2 kids feeling better, and she can go back to the office. I think that's just going to be unbelievable. And I think AI coming into Africa or any market is going to be fantastic. And that, for some people, it's going to be disruption. For other people, it's going to be evolution.
Yes.
And, and I think let's go focus on the evolutionary parts of this stuff, because I think that's going to be very helpful. But, getting back to your conversation, it's going to require capital. So there's going to need a lot more money. You're going to have to build twice as much infrastructure than we currently have in Africa. And that's going to mean, it's got to mean more jobs and more opportunity for the general African public.
It's interesting, your example on healthcare. Someone gave me an example the other day of how it could be used in classrooms. In Africa, there is a real shortage of teachers, and classroom sizes tend to be quite large. And often you find kids get left behind because they just can't keep up with the majority of the class who are progressing. But if there was an AI tutor helping those kids, there could be individualized lessons where they are actually kept up all the time, and the computer, the AI, knows how far the various kids in the class are and able to help them on a one-on-one basis so that they all go through to the next grade with the same level of knowledge.
Lovely. So imagine AI tutor that, first thing you do as a student is you read 3 paragraphs and then answer 4 questions, and quickly it assesses your reading ability. And so it says, okay, this student is at, this many words per minute, and he retains, so much percentage of what he just read. And then, to your point, now you have AI assisted lessons that say, we just got to slow it down a little bit for him or her. And suddenly they're keeping up, and, you're showing progress. No teacher can do that. they just don't have the time, and
exactly.
they can't do
They
it.
just don't have the resource, the time available to manage every pupil individually.
100%. Yeah, I think there's, people are worried about manufacturing, engineering, and those skills. I think healthcare and education are going to be the ones that are going to be the most disrupted. The bright minds are still going to go to, Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge, and you're still going to have great institutions, but it's going to be more of a nostalgic institutional value than it is. What information does Trinity have that you can't get at your fingertips? If you want to work at it, and that's going to be the exciting thing, right? Because you're going to find a bunch of kids who were just untapped because they didn't have the resources to get into the best school and stuff like that, but the minds were still there. And we're going to start untapping those kids and giving them a platform to succeed, and they're going to go. I think that it's going to be fantastic.
And democratize education.
Democratize education. But I think, listen, not without risk. We have seen that social media has some negative impacts on society. So let's learn from those lessons. I don't know if regulation is the right answer, but self-regulation may be the right answer. But we've got to figure out how to do it. And I saw Sam Altman was speaking, who's considered one of the thought leaders in AI, and he gave the example. He said, listen, when Photoshop came out, everyone was, oh, this is really cool. And it's pretty quick. People were Photoshopping different faces on top of different bodies and doing all sorts of different fun things with Photoshop. But everyone figured out pretty quickly, oh, what's real, what's fake. And I think that analogy makes sense for AI. We're going to have to figure it out, with the exception of AI potentially can cause more damage if left unmanaged. Yeah. But I'm with you. I'm an eternal optimist. I think the education part of this is going to be fantastic, especially for Africa, where you don't have enough teachers.
Exactly.
And even other skills, right? Like manufacturing, engineering. There's skills that we need to build more roads, to build more towers, to build more data centers. You don't need a 4-year degree for that, right? We can put you in front of a computer and have and be taught those skills and go out to the workforce and start doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, AI is brilliant for your business because there's more demand for data centers. I did read a joke the other day. Someone suggested that the only company getting rich from AI is NVIDIA because everyone's buying their equipment at huge cost. But I suppose that investment has to happen up front, but the real benefit.
They were a great company before AI. They've been helping people with AI. I mean, they're under great leadership. But that is, I would, if you could see one thing about AI or kind of the engine, their recent talk at their investor day is worth a listen to.
Okay, I must go and listen to that. But fascinating company.
Yeah. Very fascinating. But I would say that is, the joke is not lost on me. But Google's coming.
Absolutely.
Microsoft is coming, and we have so many different applications that are coming, above and beyond that. So I look forward to the next. We live in interesting times.
We do indeed. We do indeed. Yeah. My last question to you around AI, then, and to close the conversation today is. It's good for data center companies like Africa Data Centers, but how do you see AI being deployed to make your data centers more efficient, to help you do business better? Yeah,
so I think all of what we were discussing today is important, right? So everything from design, foundational elements, to how we build it, to analysis of where airflow is versus energy consumption. What times of day should we turn the cooling off or on? I think all of these things that we're using kind of human judgment on, we can start relying on machines to start helping us. And it can analyze, for example, security and maintenance, right? It can tell me exactly where the security threats are immediately. It can tell me where, and it can do it across the entire continent, not just one facility. So I think there's going to be lots of little things that we're going to start bringing into the business on an analytics side. Business analytics the study of business analytics has been around for several years now. I think all of that information will now be able to be used more efficiently as AI comes into fold. So, on an order of magnitude basis, I can't comment. Does it mean we're going to get 10% more efficient or 50% more efficient? But my guess is that I will be using more of the data that we produce to help us run the business.
Right. And in future, you may even be able to predict and say, well, that power relay in that part of the data center is likely to fail based on our knowledge of what's happened elsewhere in this facility. And you should probably look at it, if not consider replacing it, for example.
I think mean time to repair is one of the things that you'll see exactly. And we're always we're always trying to push one more drop of juice out of the orange, right? As humans, right? So we're going to be, but now you'll know the calculated risk associated with that, So we're looking at it. I still think it's a few years away before it actually starts impacting our day-to-day life. But Duncan, you're spot on. I believe that is going to be impacting our operation.
Tesh Durvasula is Chief Executive of Africa Data Centers. Thanks, as always, Tesh, for sharing your valuable insights with our audience. Much appreciated.
Duncan, thank you. Have a great day and a good weekend.
Thank you so much, Tesh. Take care.